Hello my wonderful people, I greet you all according to una time. Africa, when una go wise up, when una go rise up, I no understand. Una wey be Africa, una wan see gang up together, go meet una fellow Africa. Make una wise up, make una no let all these white people dey use una. Make una wise up, una no fit just wake up one morning say una fellow Africa say una wan go invade their country. These people dey pressurize una. Make una go do this thing, una wan still go do am. Make una think am, make una sit down reason am. E just be like person wey say he wan join outsider, come dey give your own brother gbas. Na una wan do so. Una wan join outsider tell you say okay, make you kpai your brother. You say yes, you wan kpai your brother because of outsider. Make una think well before una do this thing wey una wan do so. Because this thing wey una wan do so, a lot of things go happen for this thing wey una wan do so. Make una no let all these people dey use una. Make una rise up like other countries dey do am so. Enough is enough. These people no fit just dey collect for una hand. At the end, Africa no unite. Make una unite. This one na the opportunity wey una take unite Africa. My people, make una watch this video when I become na notice so. These people don finally conclude finish say yes, dem wan go Niger, say nothing go stop dem. ECOWAS abeg, make una think this thing twice. Dem say dem give dem nothing tomorrow. Say if dem no comply, make dem return power to democracy. Say on Monday, dem no go know when dem wan take enter. My people, make una be careful o. Abeg, Nigeria youths, abeg, make una dey wash hands, make una dey careful, abeg. This thing not be small pikin play again o.
Amongst you must be your servant. This is what Africa is asking for. And Africa has been asking this question since she regained her independence. You know, when one is talking about leadership in Africa, one must go into history and ask ourselves, what was leadership before we were rudely disrupted? We had our traditional rulers. How did they govern? For whose benefit did they govern? They are still there, the traditional rulers. How do they fit in the new dispensation? When we regained independence and adopted all these structures from the erstwhile colonizer, what did we expect to deliver? That great American Pan-Africanist John Hendricks Clark says that when Africans regained their independence, not a single one of them re-examined the style of leadership. All of them continued with a mimicry of the leadership that they inherited from the colonizer. And he then delivers this verdict: not a single African country will ever succeed by mimicry. And I want to submit to you that whether one agrees or disagrees with John Hendricks Clark, one must look at Africa in order to ask ourselves, what is the state of leadership in Africa? And permit me to run you across the continent of Africa, and you will see a continent that is not at ease. The continent is not at ease because the continent is suffering from a deficit of leadership. Look at Africa today. Tell me whether we are at ease in Niger. Tell me whether Mali is settled. Tell me whether there is quiet and calm in Chad. Tell me whether Guinea-Bissau is doing well. Tell me whether the Cameroons are stable. Tell me whether Central African Republic is good. Tell me whether Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, Northern Mozambique, and all these countries where there is peace and quiet, whether the sons and daughters of this country, tell me whether even this great Nigeria is at ease. Tell me. The answer is, she is not. And I dare say that as long as Nigeria is not at ease, Africa will never be at ease. If Africa wants to be at ease, Nigeria must be at ease. She is the largest economy in Africa. She has a population of over nearly 200 million people. One in every African is a Nigerian. She is represented in every sector. If you want the best engineers in the continent, they are Nigerians. If you want the best doctors, they are Nigerians. If you want good lawyers, they are Nigerians. If you want good people, they are Nigerians. But also, if you want Yahoo boys, they are Nigerians. Nigeria is a great country. A friend of mine once told me that if you go to any part of the world and you do not find a Nigeria, leave that place, because there is nothing to do there. Nigerians are present everywhere in the world, everywhere in Africa, and Nigeria, I'm told, is a $500 billion economy. Never ever be proud of that, Nigerians. This is an economy that should at least be a $4 trillion GDP economy. Whenever you reach that level, then I'll say Nigeria is doing the right thing. All the ingredients are there. The question is, why is it that she is not realizing our potential? When we talk about leadership, we must ask ourselves, why is it that despite the best intention of the best of us, we do not gain what we desire? You know, I said that when you look at Africa and leadership, you must go back to history. And you ask yourself what the leadership is. And we have looked at Africa that is not at ease. But yet there is a sense in which Africa has had and continues to have men and women of renown. I remember, courtesy of history, when Africa was struggling for our independence. I can remember that great meeting in Manchester in the United States of America, the Pan-African meeting. And history tells me that Nigeria was there. Chief Obafemi Awolowo was there in 1945. And I can still remember his words spoken about African unity. I remember that Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah was there. And then we remember how they came back to the continent to lead the continent. And I am still wondering how in those days, without the benefit of the internet, without the benefit of all means of communication that we now have today, that those men and women were able to govern and to galvanize the attention of the continent of Africa for the sake of Africa. They were there throughout. But even prior to that, I can still remember another great African talking about leading Africa out of our state, the great South African Pixley Kaisa Kaseme in 1906 in Columbia in the United States of America, saying Africa must be regenerated. When all these things happened, there were leaders in Africa at that time, and their mandate was cut out for them. Their mandate was to ensure that we broke the colonial chains, and we did. I remember, and many of you here, courtesy of history, will remember many Africans at that time, and if I name them, you will agree with me that they were leaders. How many of you in this assembly will not remember Marcus Garvey and say that he was a leader? How many of you here will not remember Julius Nyerere and not say that he was a leader? How many of you will remember Kaunda, Amilcar Cabral, Samora Moises Machel, Agostino Neto, Namdi Azikiwe, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Gamal Abdel Nasser, and many others, and remember that they were leaders who did not want to occupy political space because of material aggrandizement. They denied themselves. I so very fondly remember that when Kenneth David Kaunda left office, it was said of him that the only amount of money he had in his account was the equivalent of $5,000. That is what your current politician eats for breakfast. I can remember when Julius Kambarage Nyerere left office after 24 years, the only amount of money that he had in his account was the equivalent of 8,000 United States dollars. That is what your current politician uses for a single visit to a gymnasium. They were leaders who were selfless. They understood that it was an honor and privilege. They sacrificed their lives. They saw their positions of leadership as that of leading their brethren. They did not think that they were superior to the people they led. They thought it was a privilege and that they had the honor, and that because they had that honor, then they had to serve their leaders with distinction, with consistency. They were prepared to be questioned. They did not believe that they had the monopoly of knowledge and wisdom. They were leaders because they were servants. You know, I can still remember Julius Kambarage Nyerere speaking on the 6th day of March, 1997 in Accra, Ghana, on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of the independence of Ghana. under the subject, "Without unity, Africa has no future." Mwalimu recounts the history of Africa. He says, when we rose up against the colonialists, our agenda was cut out for us. We, the Africans, had been humiliated in our own land. Our people had been denied the opportunity to realize their potential. Our mandate was one, to expel the colonizer. We did our bit. We made our mistakes. But who said we were infallible? This struggle is an intergenerational struggle. The next generation after us had the duty to pick up the baton and to run the next leg. The question is, did that generation pick up the baton? Have they run the leg well? The answer, not as well as they should have. Because we must never make the mistake of assuming that African leaders have done nothing. No, that would be too harsh. I think attempts have been made, whether in Nigeria or in different parts of Africa, to liberate ourselves from the chains and sorrows of the colonial project. But remember, as Kwame once said, the colonialist never left. He is alive and well. He still wears different masks. And those masks may appear to camouflage him, but they are here. Have you ever wondered why, when the British left their colonies, they created something that they called the Commonwealth of Nations, to which Nigeria belongs? In that Commonwealth of Nations, the head is the British monarch. When the Queen dies, the King becomes its head. It is headquartered in London. It is the Commonwealth of Independent and Free Nations. It is not. It is a post-colonial, neo-colonial institution which continues to massage the ego of the erstwhile colonizer as we celebrate. Through such institutions, they continue to control and to manipulate us. And many of us, particularly those of us who have had the advantage of foreign education, we never want to talk ill of bodies such as the Commonwealth. I do. And it's not only the British who did it. The French did it under Francophonie. In order to control their former colonies and to make sure that they remain within their sphere of influence, they created a body which is alive and well. In the former French colonies, it's even worse. They even print their currency. The Portuguese did it. So, in as much as African leaders have been trying to ensure that we change the circumstances of our people, there have been external attempts at torpedoing those efforts. And Africa and African leadership must be seen in those contexts. There are those in many African countries who have allowed themselves to be acolytes of the neo-colonizers and to the detriment of the continent of Africa. So when we interrogate leadership, we must ask ourselves, how free are our leaders? How free are our politicians from external influence? But is that an excuse? No, it cannot be an excuse. Leaders in a multi-ethnic environment must also be different. You know, Nigeria, as Chinua rightly said, like all African countries, is an artificial entity. Chinua says in his book, The Trouble with Nigeria, that there is nothing comparable to how the European nations were created. There is no Nigerian, Chinua Achebe says, in the same way as there is a Danish or a Swedish or a Norwegian. Nigeria is a unique state with many states. The same is true of Kenya. The same is true of Ghana. Nigeria possibly has over 500 nations within her. Tanzania, 136. The Democratic Republic of Congo, 306. Kenya, 42. Uganda, 56. In order to be a leader in such countries, those who have the honor and privilege must be men and women who are prepared to ensure that they weld the bonds amongst those people. As Samora Moises Machel said, if the post-colonial African country is to succeed, the tribe must die. And the tribe must die because if the tribe does not die, then the new nation will never thrive. And I did not understand Samora Moises Machel to say that you should stop being a Yoruba. No. I did not understand him to say that you should stop being a thief or to stop being an Igbo or Hausa or a Fulani. No. Those are cultural mosaics which, when put together, make a nation beautiful and strong. But what do we do in most of Africa? We use those cultural differences to divide the people. We use those cultural differences to reinforce centrifugal forces and therefore threaten the very nation which we want to serve. I am telling all of us who are present here, and many of you who are present in this assembly, who are honored and respected and claim to be leaders, that you have a duty to ensure that you are in front in order to serve and not to be served. But ladies and gentlemen, let us also ask ourselves about followership. You know, as a young student, and many of us who are young students, it was the culture when you are in your first year of studies that you must be a revolutionary. And a revolutionary in the style of Karl Marx. And therefore you would say, workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. All of us were revolutionaries. And we used to say then that the safety of the bourgeois demands that the proletariat be kept in the most